Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture the classic sports movie montage for a second. The hero is lying on a yoga mat in a totally silent room, eyes closed, peacefully meditating on their upcoming victory. It looks incredibly zen, right? Well, neuroscience actually completely disagrees with Hollywood. We are going to tear down that myth today because the science of mental rehearsal tells us that almost every single element of that peaceful imagery is actively working against you. Have you ever done your visualization exactly how they tell you to? Quiet room, calm breathing, executing perfectly in your mind's eye. Imagine a golfer who envisions this flawless 300-yard drive while sitting quietly in their living room. But then they step up to the actual tee and just chunk it straight into the bunker. The image was perfectly clear in their head, but on the actual day, their body behaved as though that rehearsal had never even happened. That disconnect is a deeply frustrating reality for so many performers. So why doesn't it transfer? Section 1. The visualization trap. So when your visualization fails, what's the usual diagnosis? Usually people just tell you to try harder or make the image brighter. But honestly, they are completely missing a massive, devastating mismatch here. Think about the reality of what you are actually doing. Rehearsing in your silent pajamas while watching yourself from a calm, third-person perspective is a completely different neurological state than standing up, totally keyed up by adrenaline, and looking through your own eyes in a noisy arena or a high-stakes boardroom. By lying down in a state of zen, you are quite literally practicing the mismatch instead of the real event. Which brings us to a pretty jarring realization. It sounds ridiculously simple, but what if the reason your visualization is doing absolutely nothing is simply because you've been doing it lying down? It is a completely fair question. We really have to look at the physical reality of our bodies to understand why traditional relaxation-based methods completely fail to translate to the pitch. Section 2. The PETTLEP solution. Okay, to fix this huge disconnect, we need a radically different framework. Let's actually trace this journey of scientific discovery over the last few decades. It starts with some foundational neurology back in 1994, which then paved the way for the PETTLEP framework published by Holmes and Collins in 2001. From there, the theory was put to the test in major physical sports experiments in 2007, and it continues to hold up against rigorous modern scrutiny and meta-analyses today. So the core mechanism behind this whole shift is this incredible concept called functional equivalence. Back in 1994, Mark Generod proved something absolutely wild. Imagining a movement and physically executing it use almost the exact same neural machinery. Literally, your brain lights up like a circuit board in the exact same pattern whether you are holding a real ball or an imaginary one. Your brain barely knows the difference. But here's the catch. Every physical dimension where your imagery differs from reality actively reduces that crucial neural overlap. So, the million-dollar question, how do we maximize that neural overlap? Well, Holmes and Collins figured out we can do it by hitting 7 specific targets. This is the PETTLEP acronym. P is for physical, meaning you should actually hold your equipment and stand in the correct posture. E is for environment, maybe put in on crowd noise if you're prepping for a big game. The first T is for task, matching the exact physical mechanics of what you'll actually do. The second T is for timing, doing it at true, real-time game speed. L is for learning, meaning you have to update your imagery as your real skills improve. E is for emotion, letting yourself feel that nervous, competitive adrenaline instead of a synthetic, serene calm. And finally, P is for perspective, looking out of your own eyes rather than watching yourself like a movie. Section 3. The evidence in action. Theory is great and all, but what happens when athletes actually use this stuff? In 2007, researchers tested this out on hockey players taking penalty flicks, and the results are just a fascinating story. Over 6 weeks, improvement followed the closeness to reality exactly. The sport-specific group practicing on the actual pitch did the absolute best. But here is the mind-blowing part. Simply putting on a hockey jersey and standing at home beat doing traditional relaxed imagery in ordinary clothes. Yes, clothing alone drove a measurable improvement. And another experiment from that exact same year is even more startling. Junior gymnasts were tasked with learning a brand new beam skill. After 6 weeks, there was exactly 0 difference in improvement between the group using mental PETTLEP imagery and the group doing actual physical practice. No meaningful difference between imagining it perfectly with this framework and physically doing it. Just think about why this matters so much. It literally means injured athletes can practice without wear and tear on their joints, and healthy athletes can double their reps with any physical fatigue. And just to prove this wasn't some fluke in gymnastics or hockey, a follow-up study looked at bicep curls. The people using PETTLEP imagery, they improved just as much as the people lifting real weights. But the traditional relaxed imagery group, the folks lying down and calmly imagining the curl, they performed identically to a control group who did absolutely nothing. It was basically useless. But hey, there is a catch here. You kind of have to treat this like a medical prescription. The dose is not optional. A leader study on netball shooting showed that if participants only used PETTLEP visualization once or twice a week, they yielded 0 gains compared to the control group. You really need that strict 3 times a week consistency to actually wire the brain for real-world improvement.
Section 4. The scientific reality check.
Now, before we completely abandon the gym and just stand around in our living rooms wearing our gear all day, we do need to introduce a direct warning from a really rigorous 2025 meta-analysis by Liu and colleagues. They pooled 86 studies involving nearly 3,600 athletes. And even though imagery showed a positive overall effect, they rated the overall certainty of the evidence as low. Why the low certainty? Because over 80% of the studies lacked blinding, and there was some potential publication bias. Now, to be fair to the scientists, it is incredibly hard to blind an athlete to the fact that they are standing in their living room in full hockey gear imagining a shot. But as focused learners, we always have to weigh the data objectively.
So what this ultimately tells us is that imagery supplements your training. It does not replace it. You really have to hold the exact size of the effect loosely, recognizing that the absolute strongest, most reliable results in the literature come not from swapping out your physical training for imagery, but from seamlessly combining the two. That is the ultimate secret weapon to give your brain and body the absolute best preparation possible.
Section 5, your 3-step action plan. All right, with some realistic expectations set, here is your actionable science fact plan to actually use PETTLEP today. Step 1, ditch the pajamas. Seriously, stand up and get dressed for it. Put your actual kit on and physically hold your implement. Step 2, run it in real time. Make sure you time your reps so you aren't rehearsing some accelerated, fast-forwarded movie fantasy in your head. You need gritty, real-time rehearsal where you genuinely feel the nervous, competitive emotion. Step 3, do this 3 times a week and actively revise your imagery as your physical technique naturally improves. So, I want to ask you, where and in what clothes do you currently do your imagery? And which of the 7 PETTLEP letters are you going to fix first? Drop your answers in the comments below, because once you fully realize that your brain can barely tell the difference between a vivid, physically matched rehearsal and the real thing, you have to ask yourself, what limits are you willing to break now that your mind and body are finally speaking the exact same language? Thanks for joining this explainer. See you next time.